Leadership and Self-Deception by the Arbinger Institute. Introduction. Imagine this. You're 4 weeks into a new dream job. You're excelling. You're the first one in, the last one out, and you feel on top of the world. You're called into a meeting with the executive vice president, your new boss. You walk in, ready to impress, ready for the praise you know you've earned. You sit down, and he looks at you with a calm, unwavering gaze and says, "You have a problem. A problem you're going to have to solve if you're going to make it here." In that moment, your world stops. Your heart pounds, the blood drains from your face, and your mind races. A problem? What problem? You thought you were doing everything right. This is exactly how our story begins today, and that disorienting, stomach-dropping feeling is the key to unlocking one of the most profound secrets of human behavior. The book we're diving into is Leadership and Self-Deception. It's not just a business book, it's a quiet phenomenon. First published in the year 2000, it became an international bestseller with almost no traditional marketing. It spread through word of mouth, from one leader to another, one family member to another, until it was translated into over 20 languages, changing lives and organizations from New York to Beijing. It was written by a group of thinkers and scholars known as the Arbinger Institute, who spent decades studying one of the most fundamental questions of the human sciences: why do we so often sabotage our own success and happiness? Why do we create the very problems we complain about? They discovered an answer so simple, yet so powerful, that it forms the invisible foundation of our relationships, our leadership, and our results. What you are about to hear is not just a summary, it's a journey. By the end of our time together, you will understand a hidden psychological trap that governs almost every conflict in your life, from arguments with your parents to frustrations with your teammates. And more importantly, you'll discover the simple, profound secret to escaping it. This isn't just about leadership, it's about seeing yourself and the world with a clarity you may have never thought possible. So, let's step into that conference room with Tom Callum, a man who is about to learn that the biggest obstacle in his life is the one he cannot see. Book summary. Tom Callum was a man who knew how to succeed. Ambitious, intelligent, and fiercely hard-working, he had just been hired into a senior management role at the Zagram Company, a place he'd admired from afar for years. In his first month, he did everything right. He outworked and outshone everyone around him, convinced he was on the fast track. So when he was summoned for a day-long meeting with the executive vice president, the legendary Bud Jefferson, Tom was ready to solidify his place as a rising star. But Bud didn't start with praise. He started with that gut punch: "You have a problem." Tom was floored. "A problem? What could it be?" Bud continued, his voice calm but firm. "The people at work know it. Your spouse knows it. I'll bet even your neighbors know it. The problem is that you don't know it." This is the core of self-deception. It's not just that we have a problem, it's that we are blind to the fact that we have it. As Bud explains, this blindness is the most common and most damaging issue in any organization, and in any life. To help Tom understand, Bud doesn't give him a lecture. He tells him a story. A personal story from his own past, when he was a young lawyer. Bud had just become a father. His wife, Nancy, and newborn son, David, were his whole world. But his prestigious law firm called him away to San Francisco for a massive project, just days after the baby was born. He was crushed to leave his family but flew out, determined to do his job. He was assigned to an office on the 21st floor, while the rest of the team, the nerve center of the entire project, was on the 25th floor. Bud put his head down and worked 20-hour days, fueled by deli sandwiches he'd grabbed from the lobby. He felt like the most committed person on the deal. After all, he'd left his newborn child. He was working grueling hours. He was isolated from the team. From his perspective, He was a victim, a martyr for the cause. But was he really focused on the project? Bud admits he wasn't. He rarely went up to the 25th floor where all the critical negotiations were happening. He missed key updates and was chewed out for it. He didn't even know that food was being served around the clock for the team, right upstairs. He was physically present, but mentally and emotionally, he was checked out. His focus wasn't on protecting the client. It was on his own misery, his own sacrifice. Here's the crucial question Bud asks Tom. If you had accused me back then of not being committed, do you think I would have agreed with you? Of course not. Bud would have defended himself. He would have pointed to his 20-hour days, his sacrifice, his isolation. He saw himself as the hero of his own story. The bigger problem wasn't his lack of commitment. The bigger problem was that he couldn't see his lack of commitment. This, Bud explains, is what it means to be in the box. When we are in the box, we are self-deceived. Our view of reality is distorted. We see ourselves as the center of the universe, and other people become objects. They are either vehicles to help us, obstacles in our way, or irrelevant background scenery. Their needs, their hopes, their fears, seem less real, less important than our own. To make this idea even clearer, Bud tells another story, this one from medical history. He talks about a doctor in the 1800s named Ignaz Semmelweis. Drive. Semmelweis worked in a Vienna hospital where the death rate for women in the maternity ward was horrifyingly high. 1 in 10 women died from something called childbed fever. Semmelweis was obsessed with figuring out why. He standardized everything, birthing positions, diet, even how the laundry was done, but nothing worked. Then, a clue. He discovered that the doctors in his ward, including himself, often went directly from performing autopsies on cadavers to delivering babies, without washing their hands. At the time, no one understood germ theory. Semmelweis theorized that invisible particles were being carried from the dead to the living. He instituted a mandatory hand-washing policy with a chlorine solution. The result? The death rate plummeted to 1 in 100. The terrible truth was that the doctors, the very people trying to save lives, were the carriers of the disease that was killing their patients. And they had been completely blind to it. Self-deception, Bud explains, is the organizational equivalent of that germ. It's a disease we all carry to some extent, and it's at the root of nearly every people problem we encounter: conflict, lack of motivation, poor teamwork, stress. We are often the carriers of the very problems we blame on others. This brings Tom to a critical realization. He starts to think about his old boss, Chuck Staley, a man who was technically skilled but whom everyone resented. Chuck would do all the right leadership things, ask about your family, use active listening, but you could always feel that, to him, you were just a pawn in his game. His focus was always on himself. He was deep in the box. Bud contrasts this with the legendary former president of Zagram, a man named Lou Herbert. Lou was sometimes interpersonally clumsy. He didn't always say things by the book. In one meeting, after Bud had completed almost all of his assignments, Lou publicly reassigned the one he'd missed. Later, Lou put a hand on his shoulder and said, "You're a talented man. But you won't ever let us down again, will you?" By all rights, Bud should have been offended. But he wasn't. He was inspired. He felt Lou's genuine care and concern. Lou wasn't blaming him, he was believing in him. Lou was a leader who operated out of the box. The difference between Lou and Chuck wasn't their skills, it was something deeper. It was their way of being. Lou saw people as people. Chuck saw people as objects. And this is where the lesson deepens. Bud illustrates this with a simple, brilliant analogy. Imagine you're on a flight with open seating. You find a window seat with an empty seat next to it. As people stream down the aisle, looking for a place to sit, what do? Bud admits that he once put his briefcase on the empty seat and spread his newspaper wide, trying to make the seat look as undesirable as possible. In that moment, the other passengers weren't people to him. They were threats, nuisances, objects standing in the way of his comfort. He was in the box. Now, compare that to another flight. Bud and his wife were seated separately. As they stood in the aisle, trying to sort it out, a woman from the back of the plane came up and said, "Excuse me, if you need 2 seats together, I believe the one next to me is vacant. I'd be happy to sit in one of your seats." She was engaged in the same basic behaviors as Bud in the first story, sitting next to an empty seat, observing other passengers. But her inner world was completely different. She saw Bud and Nancy not as objects, but as people with needs as legitimate as her own. She was out of the box. Being in the box isn't about our behavior, it's about the feeling beneath our behavior. You can do a hard thing, like Lou correcting Bud, and be out of the box. And you can do a soft thing, like apologizing, and be deep in the box. Tom had to face this when thinking about an incident where a woman in his department, Joyce, accidentally erased his whiteboard. He had called her into his office, refused to shake her hand, and coldly told her never to do it again. He got the result he wanted? She would never touch his board again? But in doing so, he had crushed her spirit and made himself a leader people would fear, not follow. He had treated her as an object, a nuisance. He was in the box. So, the big question becomes, if being in the box is so destructive, how do we get there in the first place? The answer is a concept called self-betrayal. Bud tells another deeply personal story. One night, years ago, he was awakened by his infant son David's crying. In that instant, he had a feeling, a sense of what he should do: get up and tend to David so Nancy can sleep. It was a simple human impulse to help someone else. But he didn't do it. He stayed in bed. In that small moment of choosing to go against his own sense of what was right, he betrayed himself. And here is where the magic, or rather, the poison, of the box begins. The moment Bud betrayed himself, his entire perception of the world shifted to justify his inaction. How did he start to see Nancy, who was lying beside him? Suddenly, she seemed lazy, inconsiderate, unappreciative of all his hard work. Maybe she was just faking being asleep. And how did he start to see himself? He became the victim. The hard-working man who needed his sleep. The sensitive one who heard the baby when she didn't. He was a good husband, a good dad, putting up with a lousy wife. His view of himself became inflated, and his view of her became distorted. He began to blame her. All of this happened in an instant, and it all served one purpose: to make him feel justified for not getting up. This is the process of entering the box. 1. We have a sense of something we should do for another person. 2. We choose to betray that sense. We go against it. 3. Instantly, our worldview shifts to justify our self-betrayal. We inflate others' faults. We inflate our own virtue. We inflate the importance of things that justify our actions, and we start to blame. 4. By doing this, we enter the box. Over time, we betray ourselves so often that we begin to carry these boxes with us. We develop self-justifying images. Maybe we see ourselves as the responsible one, the smart one, or the good spouse. These images make us defensive. If someone challenges our self-image as a good spouse, we don't listen. We immediately blame them for being ungrateful or demanding. We enter new situations already in the box, ready to see others as objects that either threaten or support our fragile, self-justifying narratives. This leads to the most destructive pattern of all: collusion. Kate Steenerud, Zagram's president, shares a story about her rebellious teenage son, Brian. When she's in the box, she sees him as irresponsible and a troublemaker. So what does she do? She criticizes him, disciplines him harshly, hovers over him. Now, how does Brian, from his box, see her? He sees her as a controlling, unloving dictator. And how does a teenage boy react to a dictator? He rebels. He stays out later. He does more of the very things she's complaining about. They are in a destructive dance. Her in-the-box behavior provokes his in-the-box behavior, which in turn gives her the justification she needs to stay in her box and continue criticizing him. It's a perfect, self-perpetuating loop. They are colluding and giving each other reasons to stay trapped. Kate shares a painful memory. One night, she gave Brian an unreasonably early curfew, hoping he'd refuse so she could deny him the car. To her surprise, he agreed. All evening, she stewed, building her case against him in her mind. Then, at 10:29 p.m., 1 minute before curfew, she heard the squeal of tires in the driveway. He had made it. And in that moment, what did she feel? Relief? Happiness? No. She felt a sharp pang of disappointment. This is the terrible secret of the box. When we are in it, what we need more than anything else is to be justified. We need the other person to be the problem, because that makes us feel right. Her son being responsible robbed her of her justification. So even when he did the right thing, she couldn't let him be right. She greeted him at the door with a cold, "You sure cut it close, didn't you?" This is why, when we're in the box, we unknowingly invite the very behaviors in others that we say we hate. We need problems to feed our need for justification. At this point, Tom is reeling. He sees his own life in these stories, his strained relationship with his wife, Laura, and his difficult son, Todd. He begins to realize he has a problem. A big one. So, the ultimate question remains, how do you get out of the box? This is where the book delivers its most powerful and counterintuitive lesson. Lou Herbert, the legendary founder, returns to explain. He tells Tom all the things that don't work. You can't get out by trying to change other people. That's an in-the-box strategy to begin with. You can't get out by coping with them. Coping is just a passive form of blame. You can't get out by leaving. The problem is in you, so you just take your box with you. You can't get out by communicating. If you're in the box, your communication will be laced with blame, no matter how skilled you are. You can't get out by implementing new skills or techniques. These just become more sophisticated tools for being in the box. And here's the most shocking one: you can't even get out by changing your own behavior. Why? Because any behavior you decide to change while in the box is just a new strategy for being in the box. It's still focused on you. Apologizing when you don't mean it, being nice when you feel contempt, these are just manipulations. Tom is stumped. If none of that works, what does? Lou smiles. You already know, he says. He asks Tom to think about the night before. After his first day of meetings, Tom went home. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel resentment toward his wife and son. He barbecued for them. He asked his son, Todd, to teach him about tuning a car, an interest he had always ridiculed. He connected with them. He was out of the box. How did it happen? Did he decide to change his behavior? No. Something changed in him. The way out of the box is not a doing. It is a shift in being. The box is a state of resistance. It's when we are actively resisting the humanity of another person. The moment we stop resisting, the moment we see another person as a person, with needs, hopes, and fears as real as our own, in that very instant, we are out of the box. Think back to Bud's story about the baby. His feeling to help his wife was an out-of-the-box moment. He got into the box when he resisted that feeling. Getting out is simply to cease the resistance. So where does that leave us? The desire to get out of the box is the beginning of getting out of the box. The moment you question your own virtue, the moment you wonder if maybe, just maybe, you are part of the problem, that is the moment the walls of the box begin to dissolve. Your heart softens. You see the other person clearly again. And once you're out, how do you stay out? By honoring the small, simple impressions you have to help others. You don't have to do everything for everyone. But when you get that sense, to listen, to apologize, to help, to acknowledge, you act on it. You don't betray it. Each time you honor that sense, you strengthen your ability to stay out of the box. The story ends with Lou sharing his own journey. After learning these principles, he realized his in-the-box leadership had nearly destroyed his company. He had chased away his best people, including Kate Steenerud. His first act, upon getting out of the box, was one of profound humility. He bought a ladder, a symbol of something he had wrongly taken from Kate's department, drove to her house, and apologized. He asked for her help to rebuild Zagram on this new foundation. Together, they created a culture where people were held accountable not just for their results, but for their impact on the results of others. A culture where seeing people as people was the #1 strategic initiative. In the final scene, Bud gives Tom his last piece of homework. He tells him to think about his time with his difficult old boss, Chuck Staley. But not to think about Chuck's box. He tells him to look for his own. To ask himself, was I truly focused on results, or was I focused on proving Chuck wrong? Did I offer help, or did I secretly delight in his failures because they justified my blame? Because living this material isn't about diagnosing others. It's about discovering our own blindness. It's about ceasing to resist the humanity in others, and in doing so, finally finding our own. Commentary. What an incredible journey. When you first hear the premise of leadership and self-deception, it sounds so simple. See people as people, not objects. But as the story unfolds, you realize this simple idea has layers of depth that touch every single interaction in our lives. The most powerful lesson for me is the concept of self-betrayal. It's the idea that our biggest problems don't start with some grand, malicious act. They start in the smallest of moments. The moment we feel we should listen, but we interrupt instead. The moment we know we should apologize, but we hold on to our pride. The moment we could offer help, but we decide it's not our problem. In that tiny act of resistance, we betray our better selves, and the box begins to form around us. Our reality distorts to make our small betrayal feel justified, and from that single seed, whole forests of conflict, resentment, and failure can grow. This explains so much about human nature. It explains why two people in an argument can have completely different memories of the same event, because, from inside their respective boxes, they are living in different, self-justifying realities. It explains why we sometimes find a strange, bitter satisfaction when someone we dislike fails. Their failure is the fuel for our box. It proves we were right about them all along. The book challenges us to embrace a radical form of accountability. It suggests that even when someone is genuinely difficult, our blame, our in-the-box response, is not a result of their behavior, but a result of our own self-betrayal. And worse, our blame will almost certainly provoke more of the very behavior we are complaining about. We become architects of our own misery. So what can we do? Starting today, the book offers a beautifully simple path. First, learn to recognize the symptoms of being in the box. Do you feel blame? Justification? Do you see others as problems? Are you focused on what they are doing wrong, instead of what you can do right to help? These feelings are your warning signs. They are the emotional smoke that tells you there's a fire of self-betrayal burning within. Second, when you recognize you're in the box, don't try to fight your way out with behavioral changes. You can't think your way out of the box. Instead, shift your focus outward. Try to see the humanity of the person in front of you. Ask yourself, what are their needs, their pressures, their fears? Try to imagine their world. In that moment of genuine curiosity and empathy, the resistance inside you will soften. The box will begin to dissolve. And third, once you're out, act on that clearer vision. Do the simple, decent thing you feel prompted to do. It doesn't have to be a grand gesture. A listening ear, a kind word, an apology, an offer of help. These small acts of honoring others are what keep us out of the box and in connection with the world around us. That was a deep dive into leadership and self-deception by the Arbinger Institute. We've explored the core ideas today, but I have to be honest with you, a summary is like looking at a photograph of a beautiful landscape. It can show you the scenery, but it can't give you the feeling of the sun on your skin or the wind in your hair. The real magic of this book happens when you read it yourself. It's in the quiet moments, when a particular story or a simple phrase connects with your own life in a way you didn't expect. This summary is designed to help you decide if this book is worth your time. If anything we've talked about today has struck a chord, I encourage you to grab a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning concepts, it's an experience that can genuinely change the way you see yourself, your relationships, and your place in the world. Also, if you found this summary valuable and it gave you a new perspective to consider, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. That way, you won't miss our next journey into another life-changing book from the billionaire's bookshelf. Let's keep learning and growing together.